this first video is going to be about probability scale and just introducing the context of what is probability and why do we use it. So the first question is, what is probability? So probability is giving us a percentage or a decimal of how likely something is to happen. How likely is an event going to happen? Okay, and the first thing we're going to look at is the probability scale. It's a good visual way of determining how likely something is to happen. So the first thing we need to be aware of is a probability scale. So when we talk about probability, we always give a measure between 0 and 1. So if I say something has a probability of 0 chance of happening, that means it is impossible, that it cannot happen. If I say something has the probability of 1, that means it is certain to happen. And depending on the event, obviously will depend on the number. Then, depending again on what is occurring, so a probability will be somewhere between 0 and 1. So you will probably have already heard that if we have a probability of a 50-50% chance of something happening, or it's even, it means that it is right in the middle of a probability scale. It has an even chance. A really good example of that is when a child is born, there's a 50-50% chance of it being a boy and a 50% chance of it being a girl. It's an even chance. It's only one or the other. There's only two possible outcomes that it's going to be. So we would say it's a 0.5% in probability is 0.5, which is an even chance. Okay, probability, just like anything else, if we're talking about decimals, we can write it in terms of percentages, and we can also write it in terms of fractions, but they all mean the same thing. If it's a 0% chance or a 100% chance, if it's a half, it just means it is 50% chance. They all mean the same thing. And then depending on the actual outcome, depends where it's going to be on a probability scale. So, for example, I might say tomorrow the chances of rain is 0.7. 0.7 on a probability scale would be around here. So I would say the chances of it raining tomorrow is 0.7. That transfers to 75%. That transfers to 7/10, etc. Okay, there's some key words we need to be aware of when it comes to probability scales, and it's things like likely to happen, unlikely to happen, and things like that. So if I take this example about rain, we can see it's in the top half of the scale. It's in between 0.5 and 1. So when we're talking about this part of the scale, I would say, okay, because it's 0.7, it's in the upper half of the scale, I would say this is likely going to happen. It's likely that it will rain tomorrow. The closer to 0, the stronger that it's going to happen. So let me say, for example, I say, actually, it is a 0.9% chance or a 90% chance. We would say this is very likely to happen. Okay, if it's on the bottom half of the scale, so let's say, for example, I said, actually, the chances of it raining tomorrow is 0.35. Because it's in the bottom half of the scale, I would say, oh, it's even though 0.35, okay, it's unlikely it's going to rain. It's in the bottom half. It's below 0.5, which is an even chance. If it's less than 0.5, I'm going to say it's unlikely that it's going to happen. The closer to 0, so let's say actually I say 0.1, we would say this is very unlikely. Okay, so that's looking at the probability scale as a whole. So we have 0.5 is exactly in the middle, 50-50% chance. Anything that's closer to 0, so the upper half of the scale, we would say that it's likely or very likely. The bottom half of the scale, we would say it's unlikely or very unlikely. Okay, so let's have a look at some questions. So we have a probability scale here. We can talk about this in fractions, decimals, whatever people are comfortable with, but let's have a look at different questions. So if you flip a coin, what's the probability that it will land on heads? Well, I know there's only two options. You can have heads or tails, which means there's only two possible outcomes, which means it's going to be a 50% chance. So it's 1 out of 2, or 50%. If I have to put this on the probability scale, I'm going to put it right down the middle, and I would say that's the probability of it landing on heads. Right, the next question, if you roll a die, what's the probability it lands on a 3? Well, I know if I roll a die, it's only got 6 possible outcomes. So the chances of it landing on a 3 is 1 out of 6. If I'm putting this on the probability scale, I would have to split it up into 6 equal parts. So I know here would be 3 over 6, which would mean that if I split the bottom in, it's going to be maybe like here and here. So 1 over 6 is going to be around the bottom half of the scale. So if the probability of it landing on 3 is 1 out of 6, we can say that it's unlikely, or very unlikely in this case. It's quite low, it's quite close to 0. If you roll a die, what's the probability that it lands on an even number? So my even numbers I could have are 2, 4, and 6. So it's 3 possible choices out of 6, which is actually a half. So again, it's going to be a 50% chance of it landing on an even number. So that one would be right in the middle of this probability scale. Right, one more question then. If you roll a die, what's the probability that it will land on a number less than 7? Well, all the numbers are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the probability it lands on a number less than 7 is going to be 100%. It's certain. Every number on the dice is less than 7. So this one is going to be 100% chance it is definitely going to happen.